Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. And I hope you've been enjoying the forum so far. It's definitely been busy, but great conversations as well. And I hope you're experiencing the same. My name is Heba, and I'm very happy to be moderating our panel today on the future with materials. First, I'd like to start with a bit about myself in terms of why materials and where my passion for materials came from. So it all started as a young student and young engineering student. And like all engineers, I quickly realized how awesome the world of materials was and how materials is in everything. And when I'm talking about materials, for those of you who may not be in the field, I'm talking about biomaterials, I'm talking about polymers, I'm talking about semiconductors and composites and all sorts of nice things. I'm also talking about the air we breathe, I'm talking about the clothes we wear, and I'm talking about every surface that we touch. So materials are definitely everywhere around us. And besides looking at fuel cell innovation during my years in engineering and product design and food extrusion, I got to witness how materials is absolutely critical if you're looking for a great strategic shift in business and transformation, as I was working at Eastman Kodak and as they were transitioning through the era of silver halide to digital technologies. But I also started to become aware about the implications of materials if we don't take into account the short-term and the long-term risks to people and planet, our health and our well-being. So you might be wondering, we are at the Futures Forum, we're talking about materials. Material science has always been a part of engineering, always been a part of our studies and our futures and products, especially on the consumer goods side of things. But why futures and why now? And I can tell you from the foresight perspective and a futuristic perspective is that we've got three global drivers that make this an interesting time for materials. The first is that we've got artificial intelligence that is able to help us simulate and model and even formulate synthetic materials that we haven't been able to do before in such fast speeds. The second key driver is the fact that our actually tools for fabrication, our tools for microscopy, our tools for spectroscopy have all advanced in a way that, again, makes it easier for us to look into the world of materials and to see how we can use it for innovation and for forwarding our prosperity and well-being. And the third key driver, which is, to be honest, one of my favorite drivers, is the fact that we are shifting towards more multidisciplinary thinking when it comes to engineering and sciences. And it's always been multidisciplinary, but for some reason, in the last few decades, we started to go in silos and look into the verticals as opposed to looking across. But we're back to going across, and that's why my two fellow panelists will be talking about that as well today. So now, as a foresight lead at the Dubai Future Foundation, when I think of materials, I think about the opportunity. And in terms of opportunities, I'm sure all of you are thinking about all sorts of opportunities that could be well into the future and things that could benefit us. But I'll just share with you a few that come to mind from my perspective. So in the future, materials can make the air that we breathe healthier. They can enable 3D printing of organs. They may be able to signal if food is deteriorating. They'll be able to remove pollutants from our water at nanoscale, making water more accessible to more people. Power devices help us reinvent batteries for greater efficiency, but without drawing on critical resources. Enable machines to self-repair, create robots that are more functional, adaptable, and durable. Materials that can help us reduce noise pollution. I'm trying to take your imagination a little bit out of our day-to-day. Turn waste into flexible electronics and design surroundings that look better, that are sustainable, and promote better well-being and health. And the list can go on. So materials do provide an area of economic opportunity. They do provide greater prosperity and greater well-being as well. And that is what I hope, again, that will give you a glimpse of in today's panel. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce my panelists, and I'll start with you, Professor Dame Molly Stevens. Professor named Molly Stevens is a distinguished bio-nanoscientist and a multidisciplinary researcher at the University of Oxford, where she leads a lab of 90 people. And if you again read up on Professor Dame Molly Stevens' lab, it's quite something. And it's dedicated to advancing biomaterials, diagnostics, regenerative medicine, and healthcare innovation. She is also a serial entrepreneur and a global leader in material science. She has won many awards, over 30 international awards, including the top Novo Nordisk Award for medical sciences. So welcome, Professor Dame Molly Stevens. Now with Dr. Mehdi. Dr. Mehdi Ghommem is local in the sense that he lives in Sharjah, the emirate next to us. Dr. Mehdi serves as the Associate Dean of Research, Innovation, and Outreach for the College of Engineering at the American University of Sharjah. He focuses on advanced materials for sensors, metamaterials, which means we change materials in structure as opposed to chemical composition, and composites for technological innovation. He is an award-winning researcher whose achievements have earned him recognition as one of Stanford University's top 2% scientists since 2020. So let's get into the discussion today. So I'm going to start with you, Professor Dame Molly Stevens, from your area of research. Tell me why materials and why now?
Okay, thanks so much for having me here for a start. The whole meeting's been so interesting. So I'm exactly, as you mentioned, at the interface of interdisciplinary science. So materials is a very key part to what we do. I would say I'm a biomaterials engineer. But within my group, we have also medics and chemists and other kinds of engineers and physicists and even data scientists. So when I'm going to be talking about materials today, it's really in the context of thinking of how we interface that with medicine, how we interface that with AI, and so on. Some of the things we're really interested in are developing new types of materials that can really change the functionality of innovation, essentially. So I'll give you an example. You all know the humble lateral flow test, the kind of COVID test that we've all used, no doubt, in the last few years, where you get a red line at the test line. That's due to very small gold nanoparticles. What we're doing is making new kinds of particles that provide the same sort of test line, but the color's 100 times stronger. And so that means you can detect diseases with 100 times less of the virus, for example. We're also working on new kinds of instruments that can tell us more about materials properties. So we've invented the first instrument in the world. It's now CE mark approved across Europe that can measure the chemistry of single nanoparticles in an automated fashion. That's never previously been possible, and it's going to change the way we can look at analysis of new gene therapies, new vaccines, and so on. And we're now working with many pharma companies in that area. And we also work a lot on design of small particles for new kinds of delivery of genetic medicines, as well as other kinds of biosensing and also 3D printing that you mentioned in your introduction. Yeah.
And so you do feel that this is quite an interesting times that we live in the worlds of material science.
Well, material science is always exciting and has always been evolving. I think what's particularly exciting now is the ability to characterize materials in new ways, to predict, using AI, using machine learning and other approaches to predict what the design of new materials might be, and then to make sure those are incorporated in this very interdisciplinary framework. Where you take also a lot of information from genetic medicines and genomic and so on, and you bring everything together. That's what's most exciting. Yeah.
Exciting. And Dr. Mehdi, what about yourself? Your area of research and why materials, why now?
Sure. So first of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation. I'm very honored today to be part of this panel discussion, especially with you, Professor Molly. So now, material, to be honest with you, is a backbone of any innovation engineering, and they dictate what's possible when it comes to, in terms of functionality, sustainability, so it's part of many, many engineering applications now. And you mentioned something which is very important, this interdisciplinary, way or approach to develop new materials and to expose it to many applications. So let me talk a bit about my own research. And I started working on what we call MEMS, microelectromechanical systems. It's purely, let's say, it's a mechatronic system, and I was focusing mainly on sensing application, on how to, let's say, sense gas in the atmosphere, how to sense chemicals in water, and so on. And then at some point, I found that this needs somehow to be integrated with nanomaterials, which have high affinity, high sensitivity to an element of interest that we would like to capture. And here comes, the interest, to look at specific materials and to collaborate with other professors with background in chemical engineering, in biology, to be able, to complement my knowledge, because I am by training mechanical engineer, okay? So to be able to make a significant advances when it comes to sensing application, okay, I have to collaborate with people from other disciplines, and especially with knowledge in material science, okay? So in our research, we have been using extensively what we call metal organic frameworks, okay? So they have really outstanding property when it comes to high porosity, tunable, pore size, and also large surface, okay? So what we do, actually, we try to synthesize this material, which has high affinity to, let's say, environmental pollutant. It could be a chemical in water, it could be a toxic gas in environment, okay? And these are deposited on microstructures. So what will happen, actually, this material would capture the element of interest, and then there will be a change in a physical property that can be, converted into a detectable signal at the end. So this will be our, let's say, output of the sensor, okay? So you can see here that we need really to, combine whatever knowledge we have, which is based on microelectromechanical system, with materials in order to end up with, let's say, a complete solution that would address a certain need, okay? And I can go quickly over some examples. So we developed a gas sensor which has a capability to detect quickly CO2 leaks in workplaces where there could be, safety risks. So this is very important because you can place many of this, okay? So these are very small sensors, miniature sensors that you can place them in an environment, and you can have an eye, you can monitor, and you can identify any potential risk for any gas leak, okay? The good thing is that we used a nanomaterial. It's a metal organic framework, which is called ZIF8, okay, which later we try to expand its use. The same nanomaterial, we use it for biosensing, okay? So we developed a portable sensing device for detecting COVID-19 RNA. And we used a fluorescence, like the fluorescence property, to come up with a portable biosensor which lights up open exposure to the COVID, RNA. So this is just to show you that, if you have, this exposure to different disciplines, and this is what I would really recommend here. So don't just work on a niche, on a niche topic. So try to expand your knowledge. Try to collaborate with people from other disciplines, because complex challenges would require, insights from different disciplines, okay? And this is very important. So as you mentioned earlier, material is just part of, many things, okay, which, need to complement each other to, at the end, with a goal, to address, a very specific challenge, yeah.
Thanks for that. I think what then now comes to mind as we're talking about this is, these are great ideas, great things that you're working on, but then scalability and getting them around the world is absolutely critical in order to actually benefit from them. So what do you think is the most novel aspect of your area of research that would make the greatest societal impact? And then what is needed to actually make it accessible to everyone?
Yeah. So again, as I mentioned, we need to connect to a real world problem, okay? Now, we try to come up with ideas, with novel ideas that we test in the lab. But again, these ideas, they need to be scaled up, and we need at some point to assess their technology readiness and their commercialization feasibility as well. So this is very important. And this is what we are working on currently, okay? So you have an idea and you have a proof of concept, okay, but how to take it to another level, okay? And this is something that we have been working on during the last few years, okay? So it's not only research, basic research. It's not, it needs to be applied and it needs to be taken to another level. So, for example, at our university, we have a technology transfer office that we are working with, closely, and we are working on, identifying, now I'm talking about my role as associate dean. We are working on identifying, some ideas with high potential, to be commercialized, okay? And we are trying to pitch, startups and to take these ideas into another level, because we don't need to put your ideas on the shelf. So they need to be out, and they need to be, people need to benefit from your ideas at some point, yeah.
So also getting the startups involved, getting funding in.
Yes.
From a regulatory perspective, do you find any issues in terms of different countries and their regulations when it comes to materials and sensing?
Now, for now, we are still learning on how to take it to the other level. Okay. Now, funding, it's an important matter, because you need to have access to very sophisticated equipment, to well-established lab. Okay. And this is what we are trying to do through international collaboration. Okay. So we are not working in isolation. This is very important. You need to have access to labs outside. As I mentioned, you need to work closely with professors, researchers from outside. So this is like, instead of just, let's say, asking for a capital equipment that would require, large fund, so we can come up with way to collaborate with people from outside, and this way you will have access, to the capital equipment. Okay. Now, startups, again, this is something that we are still, working on. It's not easy. You need really to establish, a culture of, innovation, and the culture of the entrepreneurship, among students and faculty. And this is what maybe I see, maybe we are lacking a bit, and we are a bit behind, and this is something that we are currently working on, because, not only research, not only publications, but how to have an impact, how to show that your research will have a positive impact addressing like an existing challenge. Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned publications, because I often talk to young PhD students, and they're all really concerned about publications and getting out there and raising their impact factor and all that. And that's all good. We need that.
Yeah.
But we are right. We need to bridge that now over to the application side, because, again, research without the application is, I don't know, I see it as intellectual luxury, but we need to somehow cross that bridge for sure. Thank you for that. Molly.
Yeah, I'm very happy to talk about this. So our lab actually goes from quite fundamental research. We'll publish very fundamental papers, for example, in Science and so on. And then we also bridge through to application. I've been founder of 5 spin-out companies, and also founding advisor of many more. Probably over 20 or so companies have come from PhD students who've gone through my group and then gone on to found these companies. What is really interesting to me, and I think we've been lucky to be able to raise funding and to set up successful companies, is not just thinking about those technologies that are very easy to sort of, or not, I shouldn't say very easy, but relatively easy to fundraise for. So, for example, one of the companies I'm very involved in, which is called Nanovation Therapeutics, there are 6 academics in that. It's chaired by Peter Cullis, has been developing small lipid nanoparticles for new genetic medicines. We just signed a $600 million deal with Novo Nordisk to take some of those through towards the clinic. So you have these kind of applications that are potentially well capitalized, and rightly so, because the technology is absolutely fantastic. But I'm also very interested in making technologies that can have a lot of impact, for example, in the global south. And that is, for example, some of our diagnostics that are low cost but super effective. And one of the things we're doing there, for example, we have set up a number of biosensing companies at the interface of AI, and those are running and doing very exciting work. But we're also partnering, for example, with organizations like the Wellcome Trust. So we've been working on a new cholera diagnostics. It's currently the best performing cholera diagnostic that's ever been developed, and we'll be doing trials in Bangladesh and DRC. And those kind of innovations are actually so important for the world. They're very difficult to fundraise for commercially because there are essentially no profit margins really on these things, but they're going to save a lot of lives. And thankfully, I think organizations like Gavi and CEPI and so on will be putting some funds behind these things to make sure that they get to people that need them. So that's a completely different challenge. We also work a lot with the Gates Foundation. So I'm making new kinds of vaccines that would be pulsatile. So you give one dose, and then it will self-dose a month later so that people don't have to go back to a clinic, which is a sort of a real advantage in many settings. So there's, for us, it really spans things that we can spin out into companies, fundraise through angels, VCs, larger industrial partnerships, right through to a lot of our activities that by design will have to be a little bit more philanthropically sorted, and they're really all about saving lives, and then they're not about profit at all. They're about how can we make a difference, and so we sort of span those different areas.
I can't help but think about those innovations on that side and ones that are focused on solving these kind of health issues in these countries. What can we then learn from those in other countries, in advanced countries, where we don't necessarily face the same problems? I'm sure that kind of innovation feeds into more innovation for other advanced economies as well.
It does. I would say, though, particularly for innovations we're making in the Global South, it has to be performance coupled with price ratios that make sense, so that you're getting the best possible performance at a price that means you can scale it out. Yeah. Exactly.
And so I'm thinking it actually benefits everyone, even beyond those geographies.
Of course it will. And in that particular technology I'm talking about also has big programs in oncology and in cardiovascular disease. We've done a small trial with patients going into the emergency room, and we're able to detect if they've had a real heart attack or not, but without sophisticated instrumentation and with a much quicker time frame. And so that's also very exciting as an application.
Do you find the regulatory bar higher in the Global North?
No, not necessarily. I mean, at the end of the day, you need a product that functions really well, and wherever you're going to use it, you need to test that properly.
Especially when we're talking about genomics and looking at the genetic side of things, do you find that there's a challenge there within the Global North?
I mean, we would always design our products so that they could be used across the globe. Okay. Yeah, so to whatever the highest standard is. Yeah.
Sounds good. So I think what I'm going to do now is kind of to shift things a little bit. So in the world of materials, again, we hear about a lot of terms and a lot of words, material this, material that. So I'm just going to nudge Molly and Mehdi and just mention a few words, get their commentary on it, and then get them to add their own word when it comes to materials as well. So if I go with aerogels, what does aerogels mean to you?
Super light.
Super light. Super light. Yeah. Super light and strong as well. Yeah. So aerogels are gels that are actually hard, but the water is actually replaced with the air to make them even harder. So like think about future of silicone and future of insulation as well. Mehdi?
Yeah, I think they are very useful. And they can be applied, in very many, applications.
Yeah.
Okay? And I totally agree. They are very light, and yeah.
Yeah.
There's an interesting materials library in London, actually, where you can go and you can pick up cubes of the exact same dimension of lots and lots of different types of materials. It was set up by a professor called Mark Medovnik, and one of the things I found most interesting, actually, when I went there, was picking up many other types of materials, heavy materials, medium materials, etc. And then you get to the aerogel and your hand almost goes in the air because you're expecting, I mean, it really is remarkable actually as a material structure. And so if you're ever in London, I'd recommend you go and see this. It's a great thing if you're interested in materials.
Polymers?
Well, I use polymers for everything, so
Exactly.
I use them mostly in the context of degradable polymer systems, so materials that would be compatible with the body and that could also degrade on demand, so within the field of regenerative medicine, but also for drug delivery.
Yeah, same here. So we use the polymers again for sensing applications. So some polymers, for example, we try to, somehow engineer them in a way to be sensitive to a gas of interest, okay? And what happens if we expose these polymers to the gas, the gas goes inside, okay? And it gets trapped inside. And this is very important for us because it may, if we deposit polymer, for example, on microstructure, it feels, let's say, a gas or any, element of interest. So imagine that even that small amount of gas molecule, it will have a huge impact on a microstructure, again, related to what I mentioned previously about the microelectromechanical system. And this will impact significantly, the response. So we can get, a signal at the end that would give us information about, the element to be detected. So this is, again, it's very important to integrate materials with other technologies. So, yeah.
Definitely. And the infamous graphene.
So I don't work so much directly with graphene. We've worked a little bit with graphene. What I find interesting, though, as an application is actually making sensors from graphene so that you can do really ultra-sensitive measurements, for example, of binding on the surface. So, and that's a way of doing sort of disease biosensing.
Yeah, me too. I'm not very familiar with graphene, but again, given my interest in sensing, so I am aware of many, ongoing works where they use it for, they use their properties, especially, to somehow tune it or adjust it for sensing, applications. Yeah, yeah.
So a word of your own? Like, for example, when I think of materials, one of the things that keeps coming up for me is biomimetic materials and getting inspiration from nature in order to look at the future of materials and application of materials and just new and novel ways of coming up with synthetic materials that could serve our different purposes in different ways, whether it's in our built environment or whether it's indoor air quality or whatever it may be. What about yourself? What's a special word?
Okay, I'm going to give you a word to remember because this is important. So Sparta, which is the name of our technology that measures the single particles. So it's single particle automated Raman trapping analysis. But you only need to remember Sparta.
Yeah. 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 And the key thing, the reason why everyone should remember that word. What's
because
the key
it
impact?
is transforming the way we understand medicine's design. It is also used now, been shown to be able to distinguish between the chemistry, for example, of exosomes, which are small particles released from our cells. And we can distinguish within patient samples from patient blood whether the patient has a cancer or not based on the presence of the chemistry of these exosomes.
I mean, I'm really excited about the future with materials, to be honest, and this is making me even more excited, to be honest. Yeah. Mehdi, your word.
For sure, I would pick smart materials, okay? So smart, what do you mean by smart materials?
Exactly.
Actually? So these are type of materials that can respond, to an external stimuli in a predictable and useful way. It's as they have like some sort of intelligence of their own. So they can sense, environment, let's say pressure, temperature, let's say exposure to chemical or a gas, okay? And they can adjust their properties, accordingly. Now, this level of responsiveness can open the door for many innovation, possibilities, different applications, okay? So let me, if you allow me, just, I would like to take this opportunity to say a few words about, international conference which I'm organizing next week at the American University of Sharjah. And the theme actually is Smart Materials and Nanotechnology in Engineering. So this will be the 8th edition. It was launched back in 2007 in China and then organized in a number of countries, including Canada, Spain, and Australia. And we are happy this year to host it at the American University of Sharjah. We anticipate that 100 plus participants from 14 different countries. So we are actually trying to kind of provide like a comprehensive forum to discuss the current state of art of smart material, and especially the combination of smart materials and nanotechnology has been like emerging, okay, as a hot and frontier topic over the last recent year. So for sure, I would speak. I'm a big fan of smart materials. I have many ongoing research works related to smart materials. Sensing applications and also for energy harvesting. So the good thing is that you can have this material for multi-use. You can use it as a sensor and at the same time harvest energy from the environment so that you can actuate your sensor. So you can do a lot of things with this kind of materials. Yeah.
Does anyone here not know when we say nanomaterials, what are we talking about in terms of size? So everyone knows, right?
Can I describe
really
it anyway? Because
yes.
it still blows my mind, even though I work on this. But if you take the size of the sun and you shrink it down to a football, and then you shrink that football by the same amount again, I mean, it's really incredible.
It is incredible. It is
think
incredible.
about this. Yeah.
And you're talking DNA. You're talking much thinner than hair. You're talking about even I was in my child's biology session the other day, and the teacher was showing us how you can extract DNA from just a small piece of fruit, just basically soap, alcohol, water, and mix it all together, and you see the DNA. It's really, really small. So we're talking about really small sizes. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it's thanks to advanced nanofabrication, advanced tools that we now have, that this is actually even possible these days. I'm going to open the floor for questions now, and I'll come back to my panelists later, but I do want to take questions. Yes, please. Is there a microphone?
Thank you. I have two questions. The first one, we are here at the panel, which is called Transforming Humanity. So I'm really curious, what is the relevance of your topic to transforming humanity? I'm sure it's there, so I'm just curious to explore that. And the second one is you're both of you experience in working in multidisciplinary teams. I know it's very challenging, could be very challenging. What are the main challenges you face when you work with specialists from different disciplines? Yeah, thank you.
I think you're just talking about the track being all about transforming humanity. So I think very briefly, as I mentioned, materials are everywhere. So I just want you to imagine all materials, thanks to AI, thanks to these cross-disciplinary teams, thanks to our ability to see what we could not previously see, change everything that we touch and see and feel and breathe in. But I'm going to leave it to my panelists to tell me, why does your research transform humanity?
Well, I mean, I think you covered it very well in the intro as well. But to me, it's about thinking about how can we completely transform the way we detect diseases. So at the moment, we don't do enough on early detection of disease and actually being able to detect diseases much earlier. So really changing the face of preventative medicine and also personalized medicine. So making treatments that are much more integrated with an individual's genomic data, for example. And it's not just genomic information, it's proteomic information, it's metabolomic information, it's microbiomic information. How does your whole microbiome system affect everything as well? So that at the moment is not the way that healthcare functions in nowadays, right? You need all that to come together for the real future of preventative and personalized medicine, and that also brings in how materials can interface in the whole field of wearables. Right now, wearables, you probably all have some kind of smart wearable. You're looking at your sleep patterns, you're looking at your stress as related to variable heart function and so on. But what if your wearable could tell you about really interesting hormonal and sophisticated biochemical changes that were going on within your body and also help you with detecting diseases earlier? That is really transforming the future of how these systems will be used in society. And that's really from a biomedical viewpoint, but it affects everything. It affects materials, affect every aspect of our environment. Yep.
Yeah, maybe within the same line, actually, again, healthcare is it's very important. And let's say the materials can be very helpful to develop, for example, portable devices, which can be accessible for, everybody. Okay, so I'm thinking, for example, to some areas where they don't have the luxury, to have access to, sophisticated lab equipment. So if you provide them with some devices that are accessible, they can, enable the detection of viruses, okay, at an early stage. So this will be very helpful. We all learned from what happened before, like a few years back with the COVID, right? So I think, this is where materials can play a major role, okay? So if you can provide, some biosensors, so again, this is related to healthcare, okay, which would help, for example, doctors to make the right diagnosis and to have an early detection of viruses before the spread and to prevent even like severe outbreaks. So this is from the healthcare, side. You can also, if you have materials that can help in detecting, let's say, chemicals or gases, okay, so that we can take preventive measures before the crisis takes place, okay? So this is where we can transform and where we can really have a huge impact on humanity.
I can say something about the interdisciplinary, because this is a really great question and actually difficult for people to get right sometimes. So we've tackled that in different ways. So my own research team itself, which is about 90 people, is highly interdisciplinary, and it creates an enormously strong feeling of teamwork. So for example, when I moved from Imperial College as a professor to Oxford University in April, every single member of my team decided to move with me. So that is a real strong team structure. And the reason we went to Oxford, amongst many great reasons, is we've set up a new institute there called the Kavli Institute, which is all around interdisciplinary science. So within one brand new building, we have people from the Faculty of Medicine, we have people from the Department of Chemistry, people from the Department of Physics, and people from engineering as well, all under one roof. The whole building is architecturally designed so that people are forever crossing each other as they walk around the building, because there's a lot that architecture can bring to these interactions as well. And then going beyond maybe interdisciplinarity, which is of course diversity in scientific backgrounds within a team. I think diversity in general is incredibly important. And at Oxford University, I've taken on the role as university champion for women in diversity and entrepreneurship. And that is about bringing more diverse teams and more types of diversity of thinking to teamwork, and also when we spin out companies. And I think that's also really important.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, you have to really work at it. And for example, the reason I've taken on this university champion role for women in diversity and entrepreneurship is that female founders only attract 2% of VC funding. This is a massive challenge, right? And so it's something that we all need to be aware of and to work really hard to try and overcome these. Yeah.
Maybe if I can add a few words about challenges. I think now it's a must, I would say. Now maybe a few years back, you can, focus on a very particular area and you can succeed. Now, you need to be connected to, persons, researchers, scholars from different disciplines, and you need to have, this willingness to listen, to learn. You don't say that at some point, okay, I feel that, I am mastering my area, so I don't need to learn anymore. So we need to be open, to listen and to interact and, to get exposed to, different disciplines. So this is how you can make actually significant advancement, okay? And this is like my recommendation to all. This is, I think, the right approach if you want really to have a research with a high impact.
But there's a higher energy barrier, right? And that's a challenge. And so getting people to kind of talk across disciplines, where often you have very different languages and scientific terminology. Well, partly actually through things like the architecture of this new building we have, so that we don't have people from different disciplines on different floors where they go up in a lift with a swipe access and they never see anyone else, right? We have joint coffee mornings every week, held each time on a different floor to make sure the people from the different floors all then interact. And so part of it is organizational. Other things have to be also around funding structures, because if you put in interdisciplinary research for funding, you are somewhat at risk of getting more negative review comments from different people coming at it from very different angles. And so making sure that our funding structures are, when they say they want to fund interdisciplinary research, actually really mean that. And that the panel structures are set up with evaluation criteria that actually value that interdisciplinary interfacing. Yeah.
If you don't mind, I also wanted to. There was another question here as well. Actually, over there first, please. Oh. Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you very much. My name is Ben. I'm an architect. I just want to zoom out on the scale here a bit. Concrete is the second most ubiquitous material in the world behind water. And we're running out of sand. Build alluvial sand. You've alluded to architecture. I was wondering if any of you have had experience or know of any solutions and new materials we're developing specifically for the built environment, considering this material, much like oil, has become cheap price point, very successful, well designed, and is one of the most scalable examples we've ever created as a human race.
I think just before we answer that, I do want to just bring Prototypes for Humanity to your attention, which is in the Emirates Towers. There's actually a few projects in there by some university students that are covering concrete and self-repair and all that. So you might find that interesting. But Mehdi, you had something?
Yeah, maybe I am a bit away from civil engineering, but I'm aware that I'm talking maybe about my own college, okay? I'm aware that we have some faculty who are very active in 3D printing, concrete 3D printing. And I think that they are working, on coming up with materials that would satisfy, these requirements when it comes to the strength and to, resistance of different environmental, factors, okay? The weight and so on. So I cannot say much on it, but I know that nowadays they are looking carefully and especially, adding this sustainability component to the, to the building materials, which is very important nowadays. Yeah.
It's not my area, but I do know a little bit about it. At the Royal Society, where I'm a fellow, a few years ago, we published a report on animate materials, so materials that might respond in different conditions. So I think you would find that report very interesting, and that covers also building materials. So thinking particularly about longevity of buildings and how these might self-repair over time and things like that. And I think another area that's very interesting as well is how might you incorporate carbon capture into these kind of materials that you might use within the building industry, because the building industry, there are a lot of issues around the kind of carbon footprint of these, and there are new types of materials that can maybe also incorporate carbon capture into the design. Yeah.
So we're running out of time, but I really do want to grab two more questions, but promise to keep it to 30 seconds. So we've got one question here and then one question here, if you don't mind. So I'll get to you as well. 30 seconds.
Hi, if there's one material that you would like us to pay attention to, maybe it's upcoming, maybe it's commercializing really good, or it's already impacting many people right now, what material would it be?
Good short question.
Well,
powerful.
Can I give a slightly left field answer, which is why don't we also think about proteins as building blocks? You'll have seen the Nobel Prize that just came out for AlphaFold and also for DeepMind and for David Baker's lab. And that is all around developing architectures that can help us predict protein folding. But the next stage of that is architectures that can help us essentially with protein design to make all sorts of new structures from those proteins, and those can also be assembled as new kinds of materials. So a very left field answer. Yeah.
Maybe, again, this depends on the application that you are targeting, but maybe I'm a bit biased because, I'm gonna refer to a material which we have been using, over the last few years, metal organic frameworks, so they are quite versatile, and they can be tuned, they can be engineered, to satisfy, different requirements based on different applications when it comes to sensing, drug delivery, okay, and water, treatment, and so on.
I still think there's something there with graphene, but time will tell. Well, let's see. One more question, 30 seconds, please.
So you spoke about human-centric design while building, right? And I was just wondering how inclusivity for building in the global south looks like, because you're trying to build with, not build for. So on a ground level, when you are building around human-centric design, like wearables, things like that in the global south, what does that look like?
Well, it looks like engaging with groups that are based in locations that you ultimately want to roll out the technology. And so, for example, for us, we've worked a lot in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa around the area of early HIV diagnostics, in particular with the Africa Health Research Institute. Right now, for our cholera diagnostic, we have very strong partnerships in Bangladesh, and as part of that have actually held around table discussions with very senior healthcare officials in Bangladesh around essentially discussing with them the considerations for the design. And so all the time you need to be thinking about having the right stakeholders around the table. And we work also in Uganda and Ghana as well, but always in collaboration with people actually on the ground that understand much better what the considerations are for how it will be deployed and then rolled out. Yeah. Mm.
So with that, you want to mention something?
Yeah,
Mehdi?
maybe I can refer to a project that we had with University of Waterloo, Canada. So we worked on sensors for detecting mercury, and this came from like a problem that they have there in aquaculture, open sea aquaculture. They are exposed to mercury, okay? So we tried to work together to develop sensors for on-site monitoring of the mercury level, okay? Because when it goes to fish, it will be very harmful for the health, okay? So this is an example where, we try to look at an existing, problem. It could be very specific to a certain area, it could be global, and then we try to come up with innovative solutions that would tackle that particular problem.
Again, I don't know about you, but I was excited about materials, and I'm still definitely excited about materials. And I just want to say that often it's the things that we take for granted or we don't see that end up transforming humanity. And I think materials is one of those areas. We hear about materials, but not enough. But I can tell you that I think it's transformative from a health perspective, planet perspective, environmental perspective, and lots of innovation there as well. Thank you again. Thank you again, audience. I could feel the energy from you guys, and have a good lunch. Thank you.